What if every judgment you've ever made about another person was never about them at all, but a mirror of yourself? We believe we're reading others, but most of the time, we're only reading our own unconscious reflections. The stories we tell ourselves about people, their flaws, their charm, their motivations, are often projections stitched from the fabric of our own inner world. Carl Jung warned us, "We do not see people as they are, we see them as we are." Yet this truth is difficult to face because it invites us to turn the spotlight inward. Most people think character is revealed through grand gestures, eloquent speeches, or professional success. But Jung showed us that these are just fragments of the persona, the social mask every person wears to survive. The true self lives underneath, often hidden even from the individual themselves. And yet, there are two subtle signs that always find a way to slip through the cracks. These signs are not complex. They do not require psychological degrees or years of analysis, but they do demand attention, the kind of quiet observation most people have forgotten how to practice. You may catch them in a moment of unsolicited criticism or when someone is put under pressure. A reaction, a word, a glance held just a second too long, and suddenly the mask slips. Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone you've known for years. You think you know them well. But then something unexpected happens. A flash of anger, a defensive joke, an overly intense judgment of someone else, and in that flicker, their unconscious reveals itself. Jung believed these unguarded moments are the soul speaking before the ego can intercept. This isn't just about seeing others more clearly. It's about waking up to your own projections and learning how to decode the symbolic language of human behavior. The two signs we're about to explore are more than red flags. They are sacred windows, revealing not only the true character of others, but the hidden depths of yourself. Why do we feel such intense irritation toward people we barely know? That stranger who talks too loudly in a cafe, the coworker who always seems to seek attention, the friend who suddenly becomes distant and vague. We label them quickly: rude, fake, arrogant, needy. But what if those labels are not objective observations but personal confessions? According to Carl Jung, our harshest judgments are rarely about others. They are mirrors, reflecting pieces of our own psyche we have not yet made peace with. This is the principle of projection, the unconscious act of attributing our unwanted emotions, fears, or traits onto someone else. The louder our judgment, the deeper the wound it often points to. The person who shames others for being emotional may secretly fear vulnerability. The one who mocks ambition may carry an unlived dream buried beneath resignation. The woman who criticizes attention seekers may be starving for acknowledgement she denies herself. These reactions do not expose others, they expose us. Jung referred to this as the shadow, the hidden self, formed from the traits we've rejected, denied, or been shamed for throughout life. As children, many of us learned that certain emotions were not safe to express. Anger was punished, pride was labeled arrogance, sadness was brushed aside. So we disowned those parts of ourselves and grew up trying to avoid them, not only in us, but in others. But the psyche doesn't forget what the ego denies. These rejected parts don't disappear, they go underground. They fester in the dark until, one day, they leap out in a split-second judgment we can't explain. This is why projection feels so urgent, so emotional. The anger we feel isn't just about them, it's an alarm from the part of us we've abandoned. This understanding changes everything. Suddenly, someone's intense judgment becomes less a red flag about who they are and more a flashlight into their unfinished emotional work. It also invites us to use our own reactions as maps. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with them?" we begin to ask, "What does this trigger awaken in me?" This question opens the door to profound healing. Here's a simple exercise. The next time someone bothers you deeply, pause, ask yourself, what quality in them feels threatening, shameful, or intolerable? Then ask, have I ever been accused of this? Have I ever felt afraid to be this? The answers might surprise you. You may discover that the judgment was never about them, but about a part of yourself longing to be seen and reclaimed. In romantic relationships, this insight can be transformational. If your partner's messiness drives you mad, ask whether control has become your safety mechanism. If their need for affection feels overwhelming, consider whether you've been taught to suppress your own. Often, the person we criticize the most mirrors the part of ourselves we've tried hardest to silence. In parenting, this awareness is a gift. When a child acts out, do we punish their boldness because we were told to be quiet? Do we reject their tears because no one held space for ours? Conscious parents do not just raise children, they raise the hidden children within themselves. The first sign of true character, then, is not how someone behaves, it's what they cannot tolerate in others. When you observe someone making intense, emotionally charged judgments, Jung would say you're witnessing their shadow at work. And in the same way, your judgments offer you the most honest glimpse into your own inner landscape. Judgment is not the enemy. It is the beginning of awareness. When met with honesty and gentleness, it becomes the first crack in the mask, the place where healing can finally begin. How do people behave when no one is watching or when the script no longer works? It is easy to seem composed when life flows smoothly, when the audience is nodding and the roles we play are being rewarded. But what happens when the lights flicker, the applause fades, and the moment turns raw and unscripted? This is when a deeper truth begins to rise. According to Carl Jung, we all wear a persona, a socially constructed mask designed to meet expectations, earn approval, and hide vulnerability. But when pressure mounts or life delivers the unexpected, this mask can slip, and what escapes in that moment often says more than 1,000 carefully curated performances. Moments of discomfort are revealing. A person who makes a mistake and quickly blames others may wear a mask of confidence but carry a deep fear of inadequacy. A partner who grows defensive during conflict might wear the mask of independence but carry an inner child afraid of abandonment. These unguarded reactions, rage, withdrawal, silence, deflection, are not random. They are echoes of unresolved pain, and in those brief flashes, you do not meet the mask, you meet the wound. We all know these moments, don't we? A friend lashes out over a harmless comment. A colleague becomes cold and distant after receiving feedback. A loved one responds to vulnerability with sarcasm instead of softness. At first, it's confusing, but then it becomes clear. The pressure touched something deeper than logic. It touched an old scar. And this isn't just about others. It's also about us. Think back to a time you felt cornered, misunderstood, or criticized. Did your voice tremble with anger? Did you retreat into silence? Did you suddenly become someone you didn't recognize? These moments are gold, not because they are easy, but because they are honest. They show you where the mask begins and where your healing must continue. The persona is not evil. It helps us navigate society, keep peace, and protect our tender parts. But when we over-identify with it, we lose connection with the soul behind the performance. That is why Jung urged us to observe ourselves and others in moments of stress, embarrassment, or failure. In these moments, the soul speaks more freely, and if we are quiet enough to listen, we might finally hear what lies beneath the surface. Here is a healing practice. The next time someone reacts strongly to criticism or unexpected change, instead of judging them, pause. Ask yourself, what fear just got touched? And when it's your own mask slipping, try not to run. Stay, breathe, reflect, ask. What truth did this moment reveal about me that I've long tried to hide? These are sacred openings. They offer us a rare glimpse into the emotional architecture of a person's inner world. In relationships, this sign is crucial. Anyone can love when the script is smooth, but the way someone responds in moments of conflict, failure, or challenge will tell you who they truly are, and how safe your soul will be with theirs. Do they collapse into rage or stonewalling, or do they return to the table with humility? Do they mock your needs or make room for them? The answers live in the cracks. Real character is not what we show when we are applauded. It is what we reveal when no one is clapping. The second sign is this. When the mask cracks, watch closely. That moment, brief, unfiltered, unpolished, is the closest you will ever get to the truth. What if the most uncomfortable person in your life is not your enemy, but your mirror? Most of us can point fingers. It is instinctual to spot the flaws in others, to shrink away from those who trigger us, or to label them as the problem. But what happens when the behavior we despise in someone else is the very part of us we've disowned? Carl Jung called this confrontation the moment of shadow reflection, the ultimate psychological threshold where we either evolve or retreat. Every soul, no matter how polished on the outside, carries a shadow within, a repressed collection of emotions, impulses, and traits that were once shamed, rejected, or unloved. The real test of emotional maturity is not just recognizing the shadow in others, but facing it in ourselves when life holds up a mirror. And it always does. Through conflict, rejection, envy, shame, or disappointment, we are constantly invited to see ourselves through the people who challenge us most. There are three responses when the shadow shows itself. The unconscious type refuses to see it at all. They project, blame, and remain trapped in denial. You'll recognize them by how quickly they turn the spotlight on others, never pausing to consider their own part. The second type is aware, but afraid. They know they are repeating patterns, they recognize their triggers, but they cannot yet step out of the cycle. And then there is the third type, the alchemist. This person feels the sting of discomfort, but instead of turning away, they turn inward. They ask, "What is this teaching me about myself?" They use the pain to heal the wound beneath it. This is not a one-time awakening. It is a lifelong practice. Think of the parent who once yelled like their own mother did, only to stop mid-sentence and say, "I know this pain. I don't want to pass it on." Or the friend who used to withdraw in conflict but now says, "I'm afraid I'll be misunderstood, but I want to stay and talk." These are acts of spiritual bravery. They do not come from books or quotes. They come from a raw, conscious effort to stop blaming the world and begin listening to the inner one. If you are over 35, you've likely noticed the patterns. The same type of argument occurs in every relationship, the same role you fall into at work, the same wound dressed in new faces. Jung believed this repetition is not punishment, but an invitation. Life keeps sending us the same lesson until we are willing to sit with it, feel it, and integrate it. And when we finally do, something shifts. The trigger loses power, the pattern dissolves, the soul exhales, Here is your healing task. When someone triggers you deeply, ask not, "What is wrong with them?" but "Why is this touching something so raw in me?" If you can pause long enough to feel the answer, you've already begun to transform. Healing is not the absence of wounds. It is the conscious relationship you develop with them. And this ultimate test, facing your own shadow without running, will show you who you truly are becoming. True transformation does not look like perfection. It looks like self-honesty. It looks like less blame, more ownership, less reactivity, more reflection. It is not always visible to others, but it is deeply felt within. The one who can meet their shadow and still choose compassion, growth, and responsibility is not weak. They are awake. And in that awakening, they free not only themselves, but everyone around them. Have you ever wondered why the way someone speaks about others often tells you more about them than the person they are describing? This is one of Jung's most practical insights, and once you begin to notice it, you can no longer unsee it. The words people choose, the tone they carry, and the energy behind their judgments act like windows into the unseen world of their inner life. Love, work, and even parenting are never just about interactions on the surface. They are mirrors that reveal the hidden struggles and treasures of the human soul. In love, these signs are often the most intimate teachers. Imagine sitting with a partner who constantly labels others as lazy, selfish, or unreliable. Beneath their judgment, you may be witnessing their own fear of inadequacy or their struggle with unmet needs. Conversely, when a partner can admire qualities in others without envy, such as courage, creativity, or resilience, it shows they are beginning to recognize and cultivate those same qualities within themselves. This awareness creates a foundation where love becomes less about projection and more about presence. The relationship stops being a battlefield of unconscious shadows and becomes a sanctuary where two people can grow together. In the workplace, the same principle holds extraordinary power. Think of a colleague who immediately grows defensive when given feedback. Their reaction is not about the mistake itself, but about the deeper story they carry, perhaps a lifelong fear of failure or an ingrained belief that being wrong means being unworthy. Now, imagine another colleague who takes feedback with openness, reflects on it, and uses it as fuel for growth. Their response reveals a different kind of character, one that has integrated the shadow enough to see mistakes not as threats, but as opportunities. Jung would remind us that in these small, raw reactions, the truth of a person's psychology shines brighter than any resume or polished speech. Parenting magnifies these signs even more because children, with their unfiltered honesty, act as mirrors for the family shadow. When a child calls a classmate fake or attention-seeking, they may be unconsciously voicing a fear of their own need for belonging or recognition. The task of the parent is not to shame them, but to gently guide them towards self-awareness. A wise parent can say, "Sometimes we notice in others what we also feel inside. Do you ever feel like you want attention too?" In this way, the child learns not to repress, but to recognize, making space for growth instead of guilt. This small shift plants the seeds of emotional intelligence and resilience that will serve them for a lifetime. The true gift of these observations is not just that they help us read people more accurately, but that they invite us into deeper compassion. When you notice someone's harsh judgment, instead of reacting with your own judgment, you can pause and see it as a cry from their shadow. When you witness defensiveness, you can remember it is not about you, but about the burden they are carrying. This perspective does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. It means choosing to respond from clarity rather than from your own unconscious wounds. The climax of this insight is profoundly healing. When you begin to see others through the lens of projection and shadow, your relationships stop being sources of confusion and start becoming laboratories of transformation. Love becomes freer, work becomes more authentic, and parenting becomes an act of guiding not only behavior, but the soul itself. Jung's wisdom whispers that the way people judge, react, and mirror is not random. It is the language of the unconscious, written in every glance, tone, and reaction. To learn this language is to step into a deeper form of human connection, one that does not just look at what people show, but listens to what their soul is trying to say. What happens when your ability to see others deeply turns into a weapon rather than a window? There is a fine line between perception and projection, and Jung warned us clearly. Insight without humility becomes arrogance. Once you begin to recognize the unconscious patterns in others, the temptation arises to label, diagnose, or feel superior. It can become intoxicating to see what others don't see, especially when you've done deep emotional work. But here lies the trap. The more you focus outward, the more likely you are to avoid your own unfinished work. You become a shadow hunter, not a soul healer. And no one escapes this distortion entirely. It often begins innocently. You notice a friend's defensiveness, a partner's blame shifting, a colleague's mask cracking under pressure. You think, I know what this is. This is their shadow speaking. And maybe it is. But the danger creeps in when that observation becomes your ego's throne. Suddenly, the spiritual path becomes a hierarchy. I see more, I feel deeper, I've healed more. But true healing is never loud. It does not need applause or moral superiority. In fact, the more advanced your awareness becomes, the softer you become inside, because you recognize how fragile and unfinished we all are. Think of the person who weaponizes therapy speak. They use words like boundaries, trauma, and narcissist, not to create understanding, but to dismiss, divide, or shame. This is not healing. This is a clever disguise for control. Or think of someone who reads a few psychological books, then begins to analyze everyone else without ever turning the lens inward. They become experts in what is wrong with others, yet remain strangers to their own pain. Jung called this inflation, a psychic condition where the ego hijacks spiritual knowledge and wears it like a crown. The tragedy is that this misuse of insight breaks trust. People feel seen, but not safe, diagnosed, but not loved. It can leave your children walking on eggshells, afraid of being interpreted. It can cause your partner to feel emotionally dissected rather than emotionally held. Even your friends may begin to feel they are under constant analysis, no longer free to be imperfect in your presence. Healing becomes a performance, not a process. So how do we return to truth? The answer is brutally honest. We turn the gaze inward again. If you feel tempted to judge, pause and ask, what part of me feels threatened here? If you find yourself labeling others, ask, what am I trying to avoid seeing in myself? These moments are not failures, they are invitations to deepen. True insight is circular, not linear. It keeps returning you to your own shadow, asking you to sit with it just a little longer. And when you can do that, when you can say, I too have worn the mask. I too have projected my pain. I too have defended what I did not want to see. Then your insight becomes medicine. You stop speaking from your wound and start living from your wisdom. Others feel this shift. Your presence no longer invades, it invites. It no longer judges, it holds space. This is how reading character becomes sacred, not a tool for control, but a bridge toward compassion. Jung did not teach psychology to make us smarter than others. He taught it to make us more whole, more honest, more human. And in that spirit, the next time you see someone's mask slip, ask yourself not just what it reveals about them, but what your reaction reveals about you. Because in the end, the most dangerous trap is not being misread by others. It is misreading your own heart while believing you are awake. What if the people who trigger you the most are not your enemies, but the exact guides your soul chose to awaken you? Carl Jung's final lesson is not about deciphering others, but about meeting yourself. You may begin by watching the judgments you cast or the cracks in someone's mask, but eventually the spotlight turns inward. You see that the world is not merely a stage where others reveal who they are. It is a house of mirrors where your soul is constantly reflecting itself back to you, disguised in the behaviors, emotions, and wounds of others. Every person you meet is a reflection of some part of your psyche. The one who irritates you may be expressing the very trait you suppress. The one who charms you may embody a shadow desire you have not yet owned. The one who hurts you may be reenacting the pain you never healed. These are not accidents, they are invitations. To awaken is to no longer confuse the mirror for the enemy. It is to realize that your judgments are not final truths about others, but signposts pointing inward. It is to understand that masks crack, not to shame people, but to free them. And when you meet another soul who is willing to do the same, to drop the mask, to own their shadow, to reflect you honestly, it is no longer a relationship, it becomes a crucible of transformation. The moment you take responsibility for what you project onto others, you reclaim the parts of you that were scattered in shame, fear, and denial. You see that your harshest judgments reveal your most unloved parts. You see that the masks you once wore to survive are now suffocating your soul. And you see that every trigger is an opening to deeper wholeness. This is the essence of Jungian individuation. Not perfection, not moral superiority, but inner congruence, where what you think, feel, and show are no longer at war. You become a clear mirror for others because you no longer fear what they will reflect. You stop playing roles to belong. You stop scanning others for danger or validation. Instead, you meet them as they are, without needing to fix, control, or categorize. That kind of presence is rare, and it is powerful, because when one person becomes conscious, the atmosphere changes for everyone. So remember Jung's two signs, harsh judgment and cracks in the mask. They are not just tools to read others. They are your soul's way of inviting you to wake up, to own what is yours, to let go of what never was, to meet life without the armor. When you do this, people may still wear masks around you, but you will no longer be fooled, you will no longer react, you will simply see. And that clarity is your power. The final gift is this: others are not just people. They are pages in your soul's journal, characters in your inner myth, and reflections of your evolving self. When you learn to read them with awareness, you are no longer trapped by their shadows. You are illuminated by your own. Let that be your final truth, not to judge what you see in others, but to ask, what does this reveal in me? And in that question, you become not only more conscious, but profoundly free. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.